yeah, go by the name Chazza, aka the Skinny Legend. If you listen to the album, you'll get to know the backstory of that name. But yeah, no, I react and review, react to and review Australian hip hop, which for people who aren't in Australia, that sounds a bit crazy. But yeah, I review it and I've become, well, trying to become as much of a part of the scene as I possibly can in any way, shape, or form. And just trying to support it and yeah, just I don't know, just try and bring content, the things that I would want to see, just try and bring that to the table in the best that I possibly can, or encourage other people to do the same. So yeah, I don't know how that works as an intro, but we're rolling with it now. So.
Them man can say whatever they want, it don't count until
Charlie said.
Your boy ain't ever been #1 in a country until
Charlie said.
We gravitate to the ones who are organically doing their thing. I'm gonna keep using that word, organic. And when you're saying like doubting yourselves about whether people are gonna, I've learned when you are organic, because there's so much plastic around, because there's so much concrete in this jungle, when there's one tree, some people gravitate towards that tree. In London, there's so much concrete and great infrastructure that the parks are fucking rammed all the time because it's the only little bit of green that you've got there. And so if we look at the scene like a city, there's so much concrete and people trying to build the biggest tower. Sometimes you just want a bit of flat grass to lay on sometimes, and that's what you enjoy. You understand? Yeah, you can't help but see the concrete around you. And whether you like it or not, that concrete is going to continue to build higher and higher and higher. But sometimes you just want to sit on the top of the hill and just feel like you're above that for a minute. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the analogy I'm going to basically give. Absolutely. Because basically we need to grow more grass. That's it. That wasn't a euphemism for selling drugs, I promise. But we need to grow more grass. We need to have more organic things in the scene. And so when you ask that question, I wish this was my answer now. You know, when you say about like, what's going to be the thing that holds back Australia? Stop building concrete and grow more grass.
What drew you to covering the Australian hip hop scene? Who were some of your early favorites?
So I've told the story many times, but obviously it come from a YouTube comment from a guy called JMO. Shout out JMO. He said react to and review to Australian hip hop. He basically said the Triple J cipher with Alex Jones, Husky, Nerve, Chill. From that, Alex Jones was the one who stood out of that. From there, checked out an Alex Jones track, checked out a Wombat track, and then got to Chilling It on Wombat's Underrated, and that's where it started. I started thinking, okay, this is now kind of going to become more of a regular thing. And yeah, just kind of took off there in that body bag media era, when that channel was absolutely popping at the time. You know, Chill was at like the peak. I mean, he's continued to grow, but that's like at that point, it was a huge term for him, and for a lot of artists as well. So I kind of just come in at a very good time. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome, man. In terms of yourself, you know, with Australian hip hop, what would you say is probably the biggest difference between that in the US and in the UK market? What would you say, you know, the biggest difference in your opinion?
Okay, so if you've got Australia, with all due respect, the UK and its infrastructure, like the infrastructure within the scene and how it's built is like 10 times bigger. Yeah. And then you have the UK, and with all respect to the UK, the infrastructure of that, you know, the US is 10 times bigger than the UK, you know, and that's not just streams and views. That's also down to the media-based content that's around that, down to the labels and A&Rs that are involved within that, down to just a fan base in general. You know, for every one person that you'd find who knows about the Australian scene in reasonable depth, you could probably find 100 that know about the US, and you can find around 10 or so people that know about the UK. That's how I personally see it. I can't prove that with any hard statistics, but that's just how I imagine it to be.
So it's a big thing. You know, I think one of the things that I saw when we first started WAEVZ is how quickly the UK just broke through the music scene in general. You know, 5 years ago, we were listening to Skepta when he released, you know, his album, and it was pretty big hit. You know, that was our whole year 12 sort of year. That's all we listened to. And from then to now, it's just blown in terms of diversity, in terms of different music genres, cross genres. Do you feel like Australia can get to that in the next 5 years?
No, not 5. Not I don't get me wrong. It could. It very easily could. I personally don't see it happening within 5 years. When people say that the UK scene blown up, that the UK scene has had phases, and I guess that was the international phase where it kind of really started reaching out to America, Australia, and other countries around the world. Of that 2015, 2016 period, the grime period, I call the resurgence of grime, because grime was a thing from early 2000, and then, you know, all of a sudden Skepta and Stormzy, pretty much, if you want to point at two individuals, were the ones that kind of just all of a sudden just erupted this volcano of UK culture worldwide. But there was a lot of groundwork that was put in to get to that point, not just from the artists, but the artists before them, and then the artists before them. If we look at UK music, Stormzy and Skepta are probably like 5-6 generations in. You know, it's not the first generation of UK artists, especially when it comes to grime. So then you look at what's happening now, where the next generation along, I would class, you know, someone like Stormzy, the previous generation. That's still very relevant, but, you know, the previous generation. And, you know, drill is a massive thing now in the UK, but that stems a lot from grime culture, and grime culture stems from a lot of things. So, you know, there's a lot of stones that had to be put in place to create that path. With Australia, yeah, I think it can definitely reach this next stage where there's more artists and whatnot. But I think by the time we get there, we're not going to be talking about 1-4s, and we're, you know, they will be seen as the previous generation. They're the current generation now, 1-4, but I say they're going to be the previous generation by the time we get to that point of, bro, Australia names are a household thing for some people who kind of know their stuff, you know, because even for the UK, there's still plenty of people who don't know about the UK. We know because we're tapped into hip hop culture and grime culture, and, you know, we like to keep up with things, but the average household name still won't know. There's a few, though, that might have, oh, I've heard of Stormzy, oh, I've heard of Skepta. To get to that point, there's still a lot that goes into that. So, yeah, I still think we're a ways away, but I wouldn't rule it out. And if it happens, quote me and just say, well, Chazza was wrong.
In terms of media, in terms of a media sort of outlet, how would you say, you know, for example, your React channel or WAEVZ AU, how important are they as media outlets in growing the Australian scene?
Not me, guys like you, monumental. Monumental for the fact of the average fan who listens to Australian music is probably quite new at this point. The average fan. There's been people who have been following the scene from early doors, you know, Trems, Lyrical Commissions, Curses, Hilltop Hoods, Bliss and Essa, etc., right? And they probably, if they've been keeping up with everything, probably have quite a deep and extensive knowledge of Australian hip hop. If you was to ask the average, let's say we had a leaderboard of the number one who knows everything down to bottom place, who only found out they're listening to their first track right now. They don't even know that artist from Australia. Let's say a leaderboard, and everyone there, we pick the middle person. They've probably joined it in the last year or two, I would imagine. And my odds are they don't know who Trem, Lyrical Commission, Bliss and Esso, Curses are. Maybe one or two of those names. Probably don't know everything. Now, just to be clear, I don't know everything. I would, you know, as much as people say, Chaz is the Australian guy who knows about this, I still only know 5% of shit. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know everything. I don't know. I'm not the gospel truth be all end all. And so if we take someone who is the middle person, they probably don't know much outside of, you know, the current artists that are trending. What was the original question again? There's a reason why I went on this tangent.
No, you're good. It's how important do you think media outlets are for Australian hip hop?
That's it. So, and we take that person and they might start getting into this a bit more. And so when people start creating content and start doing interviews and start doing breakdowns and start doing album reviews and you start to gain a better understanding of things. People who then educate people. Right, this is Alex Jones. Alex Jones is from Melbourne. This is what Alex Jones has done over the year. He goes by the name of Flea, etc., etc. And it's like, oh, okay, that. And then they go and tap into Flea. And then boom, this is Husky. this is what's happened with Husky. This is the events that have unfolded in his life to our public knowledge. Boom, here's Husky. And then you start to gain a bit of a broader knowledge then. I'm going to keep using 1-4. They are the fucking golden example of everything. I just know 1-4. I just know Hooligan Hefts. I just know 21 District, right? Now it's, oh shit, now we're learning about the people that have opened the doors for these people. And likewise, I want the same thing to happen in 5-10 years time. I want people to go, yeah, but you know why Little Drill X is here? Because 1-4 and Hefts and 21 Districts and HP Boys and etc. etc. And I want people to, again, I'm not saying you need to know the extensive history of Australian hip hop and you need to know what door number fucking someone lived at, you know what I mean? But I think it's good to know at least the skeleton of where it come from. Being from the UK, following UK music, I still don't know everything, but I could give you a rough structure of how it all played out, and I could at least give you some names of each generation that have paved doors for the next one below. I think that's an important thing. So I think media outlets and channels, I think, are hugely important, not to just educate about the history, but educate about things now. I want to see more. I've talked about this recently, and I will continue to. I want to see more media outlets creating content outside of just music. Like, yes, we know about the artists. What about the producers? What about the videographers and directors? What about the management? You know, there's a lot of cogs that turn in this machine that is the Australian scene. And I don't want the only focus to be on the big shiny one at the front, which is the artist, which is the most important one. But they're not the same without all of those other cogs around them helping them to turn. You know? And so I think that, yeah, media outlets are hugely important if their hearts are in it for the right reason. And it's, you know, and that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, if they're in it for the right reasons, I think monumentally important.
And I kind of guess, you know, with us at WAEVZ as well, we've touched on it a little bit as well. What would you say, you know, what are your thoughts on us as a platform and providing that support to artists, to producers, and to those, you know, ever in between?
Wait, I'm not lying, right? I want to see more things like you. I want to see more of you guys, right? The reason for this, and I'm not just blowing smoke because I'm here. Yeah, I'll continue to show open support, presuming you continue to go on the path you're still on, right? More outlets that don't just promote who they're managing. What I mean by that is, if you manage, if you are a label, you are a brand, and you have signed a bunch of artists or you work with a bunch of artists, there is nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with promoting them. That is, well, that is your job to do, you know, that is your requirement. Yes, you are meant to push the artists that are under you. But a discussion that I want to be having is, how many outlets do we have that are just non-biased, that just kind of take a look at the Australian scene as a whole? Doesn't matter about area, doesn't matter about postcode or who they're signed to or who they're affiliated with. You're just here to show support in general, not just for the big guys, but for the little guys also. But equally, not just be, you know, that can go the other way of sometimes you get people or brands that are like, oh, the underground only, the underground, and they've changed because they've gone pop. No, still support them when they went pop and go, you know what? I think it's sick that we've seen their journey. And if that's the way they've decided to go, then go support that. Don't get me wrong, they have some serious allegation or said something outlandish that just isn't acceptable. Yeah, all right, maybe that's a different story. But up until then, support them. And so for a channel like yours, you provide something that no one else does, or not that I know of anyway, with things like even just an Instagram post saying, yo, these are the weekly drops. Here are all the songs that have dropped in the last week. And I go, yeah, I recognize that name. I recognize that name. And I'm like, yo, I've got 20 minutes. Boom. Who's this? And you type in a random name to YouTube, Spotify, whatever. And you go, rah, okay, I like this. And sometimes that's subconsciously. Recently, I checked out A-Girl. And I was like, yo, A-Girl is sick. Shout out A-Girl, right? Sick. And then I'm like, yo, sitting on Spotify. And I'm like, why do I recognize this voice? And it was a song. Can't remember the name. I want to say True Vibration. That's not the name. That is their name. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Featuring A-Girl. And I'm like, and I found out that song for you guys. But I didn't do no reaction. I didn't do no public, yo, look at this song. But I took that in, saved it on the Spotify thing. And I'm not much of a playlist man. I'm much more of an album person. But in the one time I was just shuffling my library, I'm like, yo, I recognize this voice. Turns out to be A Girl. Boom. And now I want to tap into more A Girl. Yeah. That's one example. Right. Artists like Leah Knight. She did a song with Nerve. Boom, boom, boom. Then I see you guys do something. Leah Knight dropped a new track. I'm like, oh yeah, shit. Leah Knight. I was meant to check her out. So you subconsciously take things in and it expands my knowledge. It expands my catalog because it's very easy for me, who keeps up with as many people as possible, to lose track of some people. Like, you listen to them once, you're like, I need to check out more of them. And you kind of get caught up because two other more established artists you've been following, you know, you got caught up with them and whatnot. So I think things like this are good. Now, again, the average fan isn't going to go and randomly research random artists. They're probably not. Most people find out through the suggested thing on YouTube, or maybe a feature artist for an album they listen to. That's how most people kind of expand. But I think things like that are important because you brought something to the table that not many other people are bringing. Let's say, I'm not going to say no one, because there probably is, but I don't know of them, right? And so to just be WAEVZ AU, just Australia, not WAEVZ Sydney, not Canberra, not Melbourne, just to be like, yo, we're just supporting this thing as a whole. I think that's important. I think that's very, very important. And I want to see more things like this that are organically making good content. Yeah, I want to see more of it.
What is the biggest barrier for this scene to keep moving forward? What's our biggest hurdle at the moment that we need to cross?
Its own audience. Not, oh, well, he's from that area. Don't fuck with that artist. Not, oh, they've changed. That's not what classic Australian hip hop is like. Don't be a victim to your own downfall. Don't do what kind of UK grime has done. UK grime, right? Massive thing in the early 2000s, continued through, and then 2010 to 2012, somewhere in there, to 2015, had this very quiet period. Wasn't dead, wasn't gone, but was very quiet. Resurged back in 2015, 2016, that infamous period, continued into 2017, 2018, 2019. Let's say, so 17 to 19. But that artist, he ain't making the old school stuff like he used to. But why is Getz making this kind of track? He's normally a bit more like this. Skepta, Devlin, Kano, all of these grime names that you want to mention. But it's not the same as it used to be. That's fine. But when that then becomes the narrative of, they're just selling out, it's not the same as it used to, become a victim to your own downfall. I don't even know if that's a saying or if that's grammatically correct. Boy, we're bringing out the Englishes today, right? And we stunted our own growth by refusing to allow change. We become our own hurdle by not accepting the sound is going to change. Whether you as an individual fan like it or not, the sound is going to change. Now it's up to you whether you choose to support that or whether you choose to be stubborn about that. Now, there will be a day where I look at Australia and may say, but that's not why I fell in love with it. And I get it. It's, you know, when something changes its identity almost, I think that's when a lot of people can fall out of love with it. And I get it. I do get it. But for Australia to grow, there can't be this mentality of, but that one's an op with that one, and that's always got. Sorry, can you give me the reason, the origins to why they are beefing with each other? Because I guarantee 98% of the average audience can't do it. I don't know it. Now, equally, you could put that on the other foot, and the people who are actually there go, yeah, but these guys will never understand why we'll never. But there's got to be a moment where we break that. When do you draw the line and go, right, enough is enough? Now, that doesn't necessarily just mean, because of drill and gangs and this, that. I'm not just talking about that. When you take said artist and they do decide to make a bit more of a mainstream song, or they do decide to change their sound, are you going to support them or not? If you don't like it, that's fine. Don't listen to it then. But let's take someone like Nerve. Nerve has had his 3 stages. We talked about this, you know. He had the boom bap kind of era. Then you had like the grime era of Nerve. And now you've got the Nerve era of Nerve. He's organically doing what Nerve is doing, Nerve things now, right? And he has created an audience. He has created a community that have supported him through that. Is that to say that there's people who still aren't listening to Coffee and is stuck on his boom bap stuff? Or people who are still listening to Sober and is still stuck on his grime stuff? Of course, he's probably lost a few people along the way. But, you know, he's created an organic audience that have followed him no matter what. We, fans, media outlets, artists, labels, managers, etc., need to create a vibe and create a community that will accept change. And even if things do change, and even if we do, you know, kind of disagree with some things at times, still support what those artists do.
100%. And I guess, yeah, just, you know, we've talked a lot about the Australian music scene, a lot about us. But we'll turn our attentions now, obviously, to your new album coming up. So yeah, as we were having a little chat earlier on, we listened to a couple of songs, the ones with the Aussie features. But before we go, you know, head deep into the album, you know, what kind of inspired you? You know, what does the title Chapters mean to you?
Chapters wasn't the original name. Chapters is probably like the 4th or 5th name that come around, but it's the one that did make me feel settled. I won't say what the title of the original titles were because they were based around Chapter 3. By the time that this interview's out, people would have seen the track list, and you may notice that Chapter 3 smudged out. We don't talk about Chapter 3. So that's where that is. Chapters was settled because it was almost like having 4 EPs almost. It was like, okay, Chapter 1's like your rap based shit for the most part. And it's, you know, talking about where you're from, why you are the way that you are, the environment. It's, you know, it's called insidious freedom. Insidious being trapped within something, freedom being the oxymoron to that. You know, they say you're free in your area, but are you really free? We can leave at any point. That's our freedom, but we're always trapped here. Even if I move out, the mentality might always be trapped at home. Even if I move to Australia, there's still going to be a part of my mental that is always going to be trapped here in London, right? Chapter 2, it's numbing feelings. And that was inspired by the lyrics taken from Pennies, which is already out. Again, numbing feelings, the oxymoron of I feel numb. I have these feelings, but they're very numb. I know that there's something there, but I can't feel anything. And, you know, that's kind of your more R&B, your more like dance hall elements. You know, there's a lot of different elements that go into that chapter. That's probably the most versatile chapter on the album. Chapter 3 is Chapter 3. We don't talk about that. And then Chapter 4 is the ego within me. You know, I would like to say I'm a humble person most of the time, but when you're on the microphone, you've got to believe you're number one. And so that is my moment to just be number one. I will sit here and say now in a very level-headed way, no, I know I'm not the best in the world. No, I know I'm not the face of Australia. I know I'm not this, that, and the other that some people try and label me. But in those 5 tracks, I am everything you've yeah, that's my moment to talk my shit, basically. That's my moment where I go, right. That's my point of. You get artists that have a whole catalog talking about how good they are. But that's all that they talk about is how good they are. For me, I want to give you content first, give you backstory. I want you to connect. I want you to understand my mental on a different level before I then go talk about how hard I've worked, or how far I've come, or the paths that I'm starting to build now. And so that's my moment to say, yeah, let me talk my ish for a moment. That's what chapter 4 is. And so, yeah, you had these in chapters. I could have released these as 3, potentially 4 EPs over the space of a year, like every 3 months drop an EP. I could have, very easily could have. But I thought, you know what? No, I want it to be one cohesive album because it makes more sense that way. It ties in, and when you hear the full thing, it will make a lot of sense. It will make a lot of sense of how it's tied in all together.
That's amazing, man. It's good when I think personally, this is my personal opinion, but albums is like, it's like you're making a movie. If you don't have everything figured out, then it's so hard for the listener to find value, you know, and you see it in so many great albums. One of them is right behind you, Psychodrama.
Oh, what an album. What an album.
When you've
Like,
got
goosebumps, you're talking my language now.
I know. and I saw a lot of your sort of inspiration from that lyricism that comes from Dave, especially when we were listening to Plastic and we were listening to Designer, everything. You just hear it, you know, you hear that inspiration for lyricism, and for you to have, you know, and I think you're going to get so many people ask you why you're blanking out chapter 3, by the way. Just letting you know from now. I'm preparing you.
Well, oh, of course. Of course. I know this. I had a chat with an artist that's on the album, and they kind of inspired me to do it in some ways. Which was, I was going to completely remove it and just have 3 chapters. And it was like, no, that is part of the story. That is part of the journey. And so we're going to keep it there. And I'm going to leave it on a plate in front of you. And I want this story, this album isn't the same without it.
Yeah.
Even though you don't hear any of the tracks from that chapter 3, there is a lot of substance there. That is the backbone of this album, even though you won't hear any songs from it yet. Not now. Will you ever? I don't know. We'll see. I might fuck about and drop it one day. I have it. If I wanted to, I have all 5 of the tracks sitting here on my computer now, the engineer's computer. It's all there. Will I ever drop it or release it? Maybe. Maybe not.
Let's pull it back just a little bit, because I know a lot of people that will be watching this, you know, might not know who you are, right? Originally, you react to music. Were you a writer / rapper first, or were you a reactor first?
I was doing music first. So the first song I ever put out online was 2015. Writing from young, you know, songs that were never recorded. First song I recorded was probably when I was about 13 or so. So it would have been 2012-ish. Probably when I remember like recording songs on my phones, like spitting over the instrumentals, like the end of a 50 Cent album or something. There'd be a little bit of instrumental at the end and boom, that's where my 8 bars comes in, you know what I mean? Like, and so, yeah, there were things like that. Or, you know, that was when you just started on YouTube getting rap beats. They weren't like type beats or anything like that. That trend become later, but you'd like sad instrumental rap beat with hook, you know what I mean? That was like the trend at that point, you know, and you had artists like, boy, we're going to be throwing this back now. Like Whit Lowry's the only one I keep up from that kind of era of internet rappers, or YouTube rappers, would you call them? You know, Hobsons, Tokens, Abstract, Hendersons, all of these. And you had the rap channels that would promote those, and it would always be like 2, maybe 3 verses if we're pushing the boat out, and this sampled hook or this female singer on the hook. And yeah, that era there, that's when I kind of started doing my own stuff. But yeah, put my first track out in 2015. That's unlisted from YouTube. I can't lie. That might not be public. And I've left the ones up a little bit later than that, which are still bad. I mean, this is going to be bad now. I'm probably going to get an influx of comments now where people go and do this. If you want to laugh, go to my channel and filter by oldest to newest. And my oldest uploads will be my earliest tracks, and they are bad. I spit in like half of an American accent. The cadence is bad. Just at that point, I hadn't had my own sound. So at that point, the biggest inspiration was Whit Lowry, and that's all you can kind of hear within that. That was before I was really taking in UK music properly. Started taking that in around the same time, 2015, 2016, but that wasn't deep rooted within me. And so a lot of the rap I was listening to was predominantly American. And, you know, my UK knowledge kind of was retrospectively. So I can talk about UK music from 2010 and previous to that, but that's me now looking back at it more so than it was at the time. Of course, artists like Skepta is just always going to be my UK example, Wretch 32, JME. There were artists that I was following along the way, but I never fully paid attention, should we say, not to the level that I do now. I was the average fan. I was the below average fan, should you say, to UK music. So that's where kind of the early inspirations were coming from. And then, 2016, it started slowly changing. I figured out I started looking into what grime was properly. And I always heard it. Chipmunk's earliest album, I Am Chipmunk, and he had a track on there, Fire a Lie. I used to know it word for word, but I didn't know it was grime. I just thought it was just Chipmunk doing Chipmunk things. And so I knew grime, but I just never knew it was called grime. I never knew what the culture, I never looked into it properly. So when I did, that's when you can start hearing my sound change, 2016. And I'd say I finally figured out my own sound only a couple years ago, to be honest with you. I'd say everything up until 2018, 2019-ish, up until, let's say, my last album, Visionary, I'd say it was pretty much copying what I heard from other people, to be honest with you. Yeah, original lyrics. It weren't like straight copying lyrics, but yeah, definitely when I was rapping, I had somebody else's voice in my head. Now, when I perform, when I write, it's my voice. I understand my own style, which will continue to change and develop, I'm sure. But I now hear my voice when I'm rapping, not somebody else's that I'm trying to be. That's just me being honest. Yeah. Expect a look into what a young man is thinking, what a young male from London is thinking about, and the battles you have with yourself, the battles you have within your own mind. I won't spoil the concept, and I'm not going to give it to you on a silver platter either, but if you listen carefully, you listen to the inserts that are put within this album, it will all tie together. This is not an album that will be a playlist. I encourage you, I cannot force you to, but I encourage you to listen to the album at least once, not on shuffle. Please don't listen to it on shuffle. Listen to it in the order that it's in, because it is track listed in a very specific way for very, very specific reasons. And from 0 seconds, 0 minutes from the first track down to the last second on the last track, that's only when it will make sense. And when it loops round again, yeah, I won't say anything more, but yeah, just expect to look into what a young man's thinking and the mindset and the perspective that I have on different aspects of my life, from my environment to love life and relationships to ego and managing perspective of yourself, your self perspective. Yeah. Your self perspective. There we go. We got there in the end.
That's mad, bro. Really appreciate your time today. Any final words you just want to tell the viewers, the listeners?
Yeah.
You know what? There's so many things I could say. Yo, watch this space. New music coming soon. This, that, and the other. Go shop the merch. The merch will be out by the time this is out. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things I can say. All I'll say is go and support the people that you enjoy. Go and support and go and show appreciation to the people that you take in on a daily or weekly basis, you know? Going back to that conversation earlier, if you rate a videographer, go and message that videographer and just go, yo, you know what? Appreciate what you do. If there's an artist that's helped you through certain mental struggle, go and show them a message. You never know. They read more of them than you think. Some people are like, I can't DM them. No, I'll never get. Don't worry about the response. Sometimes they'll read it and keep it moving, but just go and show a bit of appreciation for certain people, certain platforms, certain things within your life. You know what I mean? Let's take it away from the internet for a moment. Like, go to your local store, and the person always just go and say, I appreciate you, man. You know what I mean? Just a bit of positivity. That's where I'll leave it. A bit cliche, a bit corny, but literally, like, go and show a bit of support for the people that you enjoy on a daily or on a regular basis, should we say. Just go and drop a comment, man. It does mean a lot. So yeah, no, I appreciate you hosting this, and I appreciate you finding the time to come and have this chat with me as well. Yeah, just organically just spread that positivity best we possibly can, innit? Like, yeah, man, we're just out here supporting the things that we love. So more than a few sentences, but there you go.